The entire dining hall fell silent the moment Olivia Carter lifted her glass and smiled at the man standing nervously beside her. Crystal chandeliers glowed above the long table. Wealthy guests stared in confusion, and her father's face slowly turned pale. The janitor still held the cleaning gloves. He forgot to remove from his pocket when Olivia softly said, "Mom, Dad, this is Daniel, the man I love." A fork dropped onto a plate. Someone whispered, "The janitor?" And Daniel realized in that terrifying second that the woman who owned the billion-dollar company had just changed both of their lives forever. The entire dining hall fell silent the moment Olivia Carter lifted her glass and smiled at the man standing nervously beside her. Crystal chandeliers glowed above the long table. Wealthy guests stared in confusion, and her father's face slow. For some reason, that sentence stayed with her the entire day. Over the next few weeks, Olivia began noticing him more often. He greeted every employee kindly, including interns and security guards. He fixed broken coffee machines without being asked. One afternoon, she even saw him giving his lunch to a delivery driver whose motorcycle had broken down outside during the heat. What surprised Olivia most was how calm Daniel remained no matter how poorly others treated him. One evening, she accidentally overheard two executives mocking him near the elevators. "Imagine being his age and still mopping floors," one man laughed. Daniel simply shrugged with a small smile. "A clean floor still matters." The men laughed harder and walked away. Olivia stood frozen behind the corner. Most people would have reacted with anger or embarrassment. Daniel showed neither. There was something deeply grounded about him, something she rarely saw among wealthy people constantly trying to prove themselves. A few days later, Olivia worked late at the office. Nearly everyone had gone home when the power suddenly flickered during a thunder-free summer outage. Emergency lights dimly illuminated the hallway. Olivia sighed in frustration as her laptop shut down before she could save an important presentation. "You okay in there?" Daniel's voice came from outside her office. She laughed tiredly. "Depends. Can you bring dead presentations back to life?" Daniel entered carrying a flashlight. "No, but I can bring coffee." For the first time in months, Olivia laughed genuinely. They sat together in the quiet office cafeteria drinking vending machine coffee while backup generators hummed softly outside. Olivia expected awkward silence, but talking with Daniel felt strangely easy. He spoke thoughtfully, listened carefully, and never treated her like a celebrity CEO. "What would you have done if life had gone differently?" Olivia asked. Daniel leaned back thoughtfully. "I wanted to become an architect once." "You?" He smiled. "Hard to believe?" "A little. My father used to sketch buildings with me when I was a kid. We dreamed about designing homes people could actually afford." His smile faded slightly. Life changed. Olivia noticed sadness hidden behind his calm expression. "And you?" he asked gently. "Did you always want to run a corporation?" She looked down at her coffee cup. "Honestly, I wanted to paint." Daniel blinked in surprise. "Paint?" "My father said business mattered more." For several quiet seconds, neither spoke. Then Daniel said something no one had ever told her before. "You don't look happy when you talk about your success." The sentence hit Olivia harder than she expected. Because he was right. Over the following months, their friendship slowly deepened. Daniel never treated Olivia differently after learning more about her. He still joked about terrible cafeteria sandwiches and reminded her to take breaks during long workdays. Around him, she stopped feeling like a CEO carrying impossible expectations. She felt like herself. But outside their quiet conversations, the world remained cruelly divided. When rumors spread that Olivia sometimes spoke with the janitor, employees whispered endlessly. Executives assumed she was simply being charitable. Some women in the office mocked Daniel openly. "She probably feels sorry for him. He's invisible. That's why she talks to him." Daniel ignored the comments, but Olivia's anger grew each time she heard them. One afternoon, Olivia discovered Daniel sitting alone outside the building after work. His shirt sleeve was torn slightly. "What happened?" Daniel hesitated. "Nothing." She sat beside him. "Daniel." He sighed quietly. One of the investors thought I scratched his car. I didn't. What? It's fine. No, it isn't. Daniel looked toward the setting sun. People see uniforms before they see people. Olivia's chest tightened painfully. For the first time, she realized how lonely Daniel's life truly was. That night, Olivia attended a luxury charity gala with her parents. Wealthy guests filled the ballroom wearing designer suits and sparkling jewelry. Her father proudly introduced her to politicians and investors while discussing expansion plans. Yet Olivia could not stop thinking about Daniel sitting alone outside the office pretending humiliation didn't hurt him. During dinner, her mother casually asked, "Have you considered dating Richard Hale? His family owns half the hotels downtown." Olivia nearly rolled her eyes. "Mother, I'm not merging companies. I'm choosing a partner." "A partner should strengthen your position," her father replied firmly. Olivia suddenly thought of Daniel bringing her cheap coffee during the blackout. No investor had ever comforted her like that. A week later, Emma arrived unexpectedly at Carter Global. Daniel looked surprised seeing his younger sister waiting near the lobby. "I got promoted," Emma announced excitedly. Daniel hugged her proudly. Olivia happened to witness the moment from nearby. The warmth between them touched her deeply. When Emma learned Olivia was the CEO, she looked nervous at first, but Daniel relaxed her immediately. "She's just Olivia," he said. "Just Olivia." Nobody had called her that in years. Later that evening, Olivia found herself staring out her penthouse window thinking about Daniel constantly. Not because he admired her wealth. Not because he wanted something from her. But because around him she felt human again. And for the first time in her life that mattered more than status. Still, she knew society would never accept someone like Daniel beside her. Her parents certainly wouldn't. The breaking point came during a board meeting several days later. One senior executive openly complained about lower-class employees wandering executive spaces too comfortably these days. Olivia instantly understood who he meant. Something inside her snapped. "Daniel Brooks works harder than half this board," she said coldly. The room fell silent. The executive awkwardly laughed. "I didn't mean. I know exactly what you meant." That evening, Olivia made a decision that terrified even her. She invited Daniel to her family dinner. When she first called him, Daniel almost dropped his phone. "Dinner? With your parents?" "Yes. Olivia, your family owns half the city. And I clean their office bathrooms." She smiled softly through the phone. "You're more than your job." Daniel's voice lowered carefully. "Your parents won't think so." Olivia remained silent for several seconds before quietly saying, "Then maybe it's time they learned." The night of the dinner arrived bright and beautiful, with golden sunset light covering the Carter family estate. Daniel stood outside the enormous mansion wearing the only suit he owned, nervously adjusting his tie. He almost turned around 3 different times before finally ringing the doorbell. A servant opened the door. Inside, elegant guests filled the dining room laughing over wine glasses and expensive meals. Then Olivia appeared at the staircase wearing a simple cream-colored dress. For a second, Daniel forgot how to breathe. She walked directly toward him despite every confused stare around them. "You came," she whispered warmly. "I'm already regretting it." She laughed softly. "Too late now." As they entered the dining hall together, conversations slowly died one by one. Olivia's father stared in confusion. Her mother forced an uncomfortable smile. And Daniel suddenly understood he was the poorest person anyone in that room had seen up close in years. The tension around the dinner table became almost unbearable the moment Daniel sat down. Crystal glasses reflected warm candlelight while wealthy guests exchanged confused glances. Olivia's father, Edward Carter, maintained the controlled expression of a businessman used to hiding emotion, but irritation flickered behind his eyes every time he looked at Daniel. "So," Edward finally said while cutting his steak carefully, "Olivia tells us you work at Carter Global." Daniel nodded politely. "Yes, sir." "What department?" Before Daniel could answer, a younger investor smirked slightly. "Maintenance, I believe." A few guests exchanged awkward smiles. Daniel quietly placed his fork down. I'm part of the janitorial staff. The silence afterward felt painfully heavy. Olivia immediately noticed Daniel's shoulders tense slightly, though his expression remained calm. Her mother sipped wine before speaking carefully. That must be difficult work. It's honest work, Daniel replied gently. Edward leaned back in his chair. And what exactly are your future ambitions, Daniel? The question sounded less like curiosity and more like judgment. Daniel understood immediately. He was being measured, not as a person, as a social class. I just try to live with dignity, he answered honestly. One of the businessmen laughed quietly under his breath. That's not exactly ambition. Olivia's eyes flashed with anger. But Daniel remained calm. He had spent years surviving rooms like this. People with expensive watches often believed kindness was weakness. What they never understood was that surviving hardship without losing compassion required far more strength than wealth ever could. Dinner continued awkwardly. Guests discussed luxury investments, international properties, and elite vacations while Daniel sat mostly silent. Occasionally Olivia pulled him into conversation, asking about books he liked or funny stories from work, but the atmosphere never relaxed. Then everything changed unexpectedly. One of the investors' wives suddenly asked, "So Daniel, how did you and Olivia become friends?" Before he could answer, another guest jokingly added, "Please don't tell me our CEO has been secretly dating the janitor." Several people laughed. Olivia didn't. Instead, she slowly set down her glass and looked around the table. Her voice came calmly. "Actually, he is my boyfriend." The entire room froze. A fork slipped from someone's hand. Her mother stared at her in complete disbelief. Edward Carter's face hardened instantly. "Olivia," but she continued holding Daniel's hand firmly beneath the table. "I mean it." Daniel's heart pounded violently. They had never officially labeled their relationship before. Their feelings had grown naturally over months of trust, care, and quiet affection. Yet hearing Olivia say the words aloud in front of everyone felt overwhelming. Not because he didn't love her, but because he knew what it would cost her. Edward stood slowly from his chair. "Excuse us." His voice was dangerously controlled. Olivia rose immediately and followed him toward the study room while whispers exploded across the dining hall. Daniel remained seated alone, feeling every eye in the room judging him. One man muttered loudly enough to hear, "She's destroying her reputation." Another whispered, "This is embarrassing." Daniel lowered his eyes. Part of him wanted to leave immediately. Upstairs inside the study, Edward Carter exploded with anger. "Have you completely lost your mind?" he demanded. Olivia stood firm. "No. He's a janitor. He's a good man. That's not the point." "It is the point." Edward stared at his daughter in disbelief. "Do you understand what people will say? Investors already question your leadership. Dating an employee like him will make you look ridiculous." Olivia's eyes filled with emotion. "Why? Because he doesn't have money? Because the world doesn't work the way you wish it did." She stepped closer. "Then maybe the world is wrong." Her father's expression softened briefly before turning cold again. "You were raised for more than this." Olivia's voice trembled now. "More than what? Love? Kindness? Humanity?" Edward looked away silently. For years, Olivia had obeyed expectations. Elite schools, business training, perfect public image. Every step of her life carefully designed by family reputation. But Daniel had shown her something nobody else ever did. Peace. Not luxury. Not power. Peace. Meanwhile downstairs, Daniel quietly prepared to leave. Olivia's mother approached him gently near the entrance. "You care about her, don't you?" she asked. "With everything I have." "Then why put her through this?" Daniel swallowed painfully. "I never asked for any of this." She studied him silently for several moments. Unlike Edward, she noticed something unexpected in Daniel's eyes. Not greed, not ambition, only sincerity. "You really love her," she whispered. Daniel nodded quietly. At that moment, raised voices echoed faintly from upstairs. Then Olivia suddenly appeared descending the staircase, eyes red but determined. She walked directly toward Daniel. "We're leaving." The room watched in stunned silence as she took his hand. Edward followed behind them angrily. "If you walk out that door tonight, don't expect my support anymore." Olivia stopped. For a painful second, Daniel feared she might let go. Instead, she squeezed his hand tighter. "I spent my whole life earning approval," she said softly. "I'm tired of losing myself to keep it." And together they walked out. The cold evening air outside felt strangely freeing. Daniel looked at her nervously beside the fountain near the driveway. "You shouldn't have done that." Olivia laughed bitterly through tears. "Too late. You could lose everything." She looked directly into his eyes. "Not everything." For the first time, Daniel kissed her. It wasn't dramatic or perfect. It was quiet, honest, real. The next morning, chaos exploded online. Someone from the dinner leaked the story to the press. Billionaire CEO dating janitor. Photos of Olivia and Daniel leaving the mansion together spread across social media within hours. News channels mocked the relationship openly, while business blogs predicted damage to Carter Global's reputation. Employees whispered nonstop at the office. Some supported them. Others laughed cruelly. Daniel considered resigning immediately, but Olivia refused. "You have nothing to be ashamed of," she told him firmly. Still, the pressure intensified daily. Investors questioned Olivia's judgment. Board members demanded private meetings. Even strangers online insulted Daniel constantly. One afternoon, Daniel quietly packed his locker. Olivia found him before he could leave. "You're quitting." He couldn't meet her eyes. "Your life is falling apart because of me."
No.
"Because people are cruel. You deserve someone who won't cost you your future." Olivia stepped closer emotionally. "Daniel, look at me." He finally did. "You are the first person who ever loved me without caring about my last name." His eyes filled slightly. "All my life," she continued softly, "people wanted something from me. Status, money, influence. You never asked for anything." Daniel whispered painfully, "I only wanted you happy. Then stay." Several days later, Carter Global hosted its annual leadership conference. Media reporters filled the massive ballroom expecting drama after the viral scandal. Board members privately begged Olivia to attend alone. She refused. When Olivia arrived holding Daniel's hand publicly for the first time, cameras flashed everywhere. Whispers spread instantly through the crowd. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of avoiding the attention, Olivia walked directly onto the stage. She took a deep breath before speaking. "My entire career, I was taught that success is measured by wealth, titles, and public approval." Her voice echoed across the silent ballroom. "But lately I've realized something important." She looked toward Daniel standing nervously near the front row. "A person's value is not determined by their salary, but by their character." Complete silence filled the room. Olivia continued emotionally. "This company was built on buildings, but buildings mean nothing without people. And too often, we ignore the very people who keep our lives running every single day." Several employees lowered their eyes. Some reporters stopped typing entirely. Then Olivia smiled softly at Daniel. "The man many of you mocked has shown more integrity, compassion, and strength than most executives I've ever met." Daniel looked completely overwhelmed. For months, people asked why someone like me would choose someone like him. Olivia's voice trembled slightly now. "The truth is, he reminded me that love should make you feel human, not important." A few people in the audience quietly began clapping. Then more joined. Soon the ballroom filled with applause. Not everyone supported them, but for the first time people truly saw Daniel. Not as the janitor, as a man. Weeks later, Edward Carter unexpectedly visited Daniel alone at a small community center where Daniel volunteered on weekends, repairing old apartments for struggling families. Edward watched silently as Daniel helped an elderly man fix a broken wheelchair ramp. Children nearby laughed while Daniel patiently painted walls alongside volunteers. "No cameras. No publicity. Just kindness. You do this every weekend? Edward finally asked. Daniel looked surprised. Mostly. Why? Daniel shrugged simply. Because people need help. Edward stood quietly for several moments. Then he asked the question that had haunted him since the dinner. What do you really want from my daughter? Daniel answered without hesitation. To protect her peace. Something inside Edward finally broke. Not pride. Illusion. For years he believed success guaranteed worth. Yet standing there watching Daniel freely give time and compassion to strangers, he realized wealth had made him powerful but not necessarily good. Weeks later, Olivia nearly cried when her father unexpectedly invited both of them to dinner again. This time, no wealthy guests attended. No investors. Just family. As they sat together under warm evening light, Edward awkwardly cleared his throat. I judged you unfairly, Daniel. Daniel looked stunned. Edward continued quietly. I spent so long building an empire that I forgot character matters more than image. Olivia reached for her father's hand emotionally. For the first time in years, the Carter family shared a dinner without pretending to be perfect. Months later, Carter Global launched a major employee support initiative personally led by Olivia and Daniel, improving wages and benefits for maintenance staff, cleaners, and security workers across all company properties. The story that once became gossip slowly transformed into inspiration. People stopped talking about the CEO who loved a janitor. Instead, they talked about the woman brave enough to value humanity over status, and the man humble enough to stay kind in a world that constantly underestimated him. Because in the end, love did not rescue Daniel from poverty, and Daniel did not rescue Olivia from wealth. They rescued each other from loneliness. Sometimes the richest hearts belong to people the world barely notices. And sometimes the strongest kind of love begins the moment someone finally looks beyond titles and chooses to see a human soul.